It is 2 o'clock. Welcome to the Planning Committee. Our first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Right. Ted?
Yes, Councillor Ball, and I'm substituting for Richard.
Okay. John? Councillor Morris, substituting for Councillor Winter. Councillor Riley, I would like to very much welcome you to your first committee meeting. I know you're not actually subbing, you're here in your own right, I'm given to believe, in that you will be our replacement member on this committee. Is that correct? Okay, right, thank you. Any other apologies, changes? No. Okay, thank you. That brings us on to item 2, which is declarations of interest. Anybody? No. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. You've had a copy circulated. Are you happy that I sign those as a true record? Is that great? Okay. Item 4 is chair's urgent business. I have been notified of none. So that brings us on to item 5, questions from members of the public. There are none. So that brings us on to item 6, planning applications. 5, land at Seaton neighbourhood south of William Prance Road, and the proposal is outlined. The case officer is Ali Wagstaff, and I would ask you, I welcome you, Ali, and ask you to start the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just before I go into the detail of the application is application reference number 17/01339 full, the applicant's Persimmon Home, and it concerns, although there's a full description in the office report, the principal elements of the work relate to the creation of highway works associated with the High Street for the Palmerston Heights development and associated works. Before I go into the detail, there's an addendum report which has been produced since the production of the officer report. There were 2 further letters of representation. Both of those raised queries regarding the timing of committee in relation to the closure of the closing time of the school. One of them also raised the question regarding the site notice has been put up outside the school. That's covered in detail in the officer report, but I can confirm to members that the site notices did go up before the end of term and were put up in advance of the statutory consultation period to ensure that everybody. In additional matters, I'd like to offer your apologies. In the officer report, there are 4 conditions which are pre-commencement and didn't have justification with those. We're asking members, should they be minded, to grant the application for delegation to the Assistant Head of Spatial Planning and Infrastructure, just to add those extra bits on there, but it won't alter the subject matter of the conditions. There have been 2 further additional elements of additional information submitted since the officer report. The first of those was a revised layout plan, which I'll show you in the application. That was principally dealing with a matter raised by the Highways Authority that one of the bus stops shown on the plan was in the carriageway on the High Street, and they wanted it to be located in a separate lay-by. The updated plan does that. The second additional information related to concerns by the lead local flood authority in relation to the drainage strategy. A plan has been submitted and it has been considered by the lead local flood authority. They're now in a position where they're happy and accept the principle of the approach to drainage and surface water, but in addition to the conditions which were already set out in the officer report, they have requested an additional condition in relation to the technical details of the drainage work, which is set out in the addendum, and we'd ask that were members minded to grant the planning permission, that would be added on to the decision. Just moving over onto the detail of the application itself, just for members' information, say the application relates to the newly establishing Seaton neighbourhood in Derriford. The application area is shown on this plan here. It relates to an area of land along William Prance Road here. It takes in a small section of Bress Road and the access road to the St Matthew's School, and then extends down what is referred to as Pintle Way, or the High Street section of the Forder Valley Link Road. There's an additional area of land over to the east here, which isn't subject to any proposals for development. However, the applicants have asked for a temporary area for the storage of soil as part of the application. Before I go into the detailed matter of what's being proposed in the application, I thought it'd be useful for members just to set a little bit of the context for what's taking place here. Back in 2013, Outline Planning Permission 1202.027/out was granted. This granted planning permission for the Seaton neighbourhood, which included an extensive amount of residential development, but also a range of commercial and retail units. It also granted planning permission for a number of other aspects. The area edged in orange in here is the new Derriford Community Park, which is currently being established, and also it granted planning permission for the Forder Valley Link Road, which is this section going in here. Just to set the context, the High Street element, which is this section up here, is an area which is required to be delivered by Persimmon as the developer, and the remaining section of the Forder Valley Link Road is to be delivered by the authority with support from grants from the DFT. Persimmon Homes have a detailed delivery time frame agreed with a local authority which was established as a requirement of the outline condition, and this is to ensure that the Forder Valley Link Road is to be able to be delivered on time. And that's why the application is in front of you today at Planning Committee to enable those works to take place. Just so members are aware, another planning application is due to be submitted by the authority for the wider Forder Valley Link Road, which is due to be submitted at the end of October, and will be with members shortly after that, probably in December or January, which will be seeking to deliver the wider part of the Forder Valley Link Road. Part of the reason for this application being in advance of that is because the eastern section of the High Street, which is the subject matter of this application, is proposed to be used as a haul route for construction traffic to enable the wider development to take place before it will be completed and operational in its wider function as part of the Seaton neighbourhood. And again, just for members' information, for those who weren't on the site visit yesterday, the area here, referred to as Phase 5, is currently constructed and people are living in those houses. Persimmon are currently constructing Phase 7, which is just behind Phase 5, and those houses are currently under construction at the moment. And it's Persimmon's intention next that Phase 9 is likely to be the next area which will commence. That will pretty much use up the allotted amount of housing which they're able to construct before the Forder Valley Link Road is delivered. Just moving over onto the actual aspects of the application, this is the new detailed layout, and this is the new bus stop lay-by I was just referring to earlier in relation to the addendum. In relation to the works proposed, we'll start off with the area of William Prance Road. There are some minor alterations to William Prance Road. This is to facilitate a number of changes. The first is there's 2 new access points looking to be proposed, which will provide access into the reserve matters phases 8 and 13 of the wider outline application. The most eastern one of those will provide one of the main access points into the wider residential development. There are extensions to William Prance Road so that this new junction, which is proposed, can work effectively. The existing situation at the moment is the junction between William Prance Road, Brest Road, the School Access Road and Pintle Way is currently a roundabout. This application seeks to amend that into a fully signal controlled junction with pedestrian crossings provided in there, which again are signalised. In relation to Brest Road, there are only some minor works just to deal with the revised alignment and the provision of a drop curb crossing. In relation to the access road to the school, that's slightly widened to facilitate the new signalised pedestrian crossing going in and the new junction. In relation to the High Street, which is this area, I'm just bringing to members' attention here, planning permission has already been granted as part of Phase 5 of the development for the 2 northbound carriageways, which are these ones over here, but they're currently being used as a temporary measure to provide both north and southbound access into those residential properties. So what this application is seeking to do is add to that a new central reservation and a new single southbound carriageway with pavement, an additional grass verge and a cycleway lane. It also seeks to provide 2 new access points, which will be left in and left out only, which will serve the later phases of 8 and 10 of the reserve matters when those come forward. I just draw members' attention just to this element down here, which you probably can't see in detail, but that's securing an area of land for an access point to be provided into the One Planet Centre, which is going to form part of the wider Derriford Community Park, and that just falls on in fact, the point between where Persimmon's application stops and the council's application will take over. So there's a condition just requiring that that's enabled to take place, just so it doesn't fall between the lines of the two application. Just for those members who weren't able to attend the site visit, I've got a couple of photos just to help make this new part of the city kind of make a bit of sense. This is a photo taken from the central roundabout, which currently serves the development, and you can see, just looking down here, this is the current high street. You can see the newly constructed dwellings which form part of phase 5. And I just draw members' attention, and to make a little bit more sense in a moment, that the land on either side of that road is rising, is sloping upwards, because the existing road and the proposed new road will need to be cut in to that land to make sure it forms an adequate level of access. The next photo is just taken from William Prance Road. You can just see across the existing roundabout. Over in the distance there, you can see the recently opened St Matthew's School. The next photos are both taken from the High Street Pinter Way. What you can see here, this photo is taken stood on the pavement, so you've got the existing grass verge, a dedicated cycle lane, and the existing 2 northbound lanes, which, as I said, are currently being used as a north and a southbound lane. What you can see here is the extensive amount of land which is going to need to be excavated in order that the new southbound lane can be installed with its associated infrastructure. This is another photo just a little bit further down there. I just draw members' attention to the fence, and you can see which blocks off pretty much the point where Persimmon's part of the development stops, and the wider Forder Valley Link Road will be commenced. And this, although it doesn't show a particularly good part of the construction area, it's just useful to see here where the development ends on the High Street, how the future Forder Valley Link Road will go down the wider Forder Valley to link into Forder Valley Road and then onto the A38. Just in relation to a little bit more of the detail of the application, this is a landscaping plan, and this just shows that the approach that's being taken emulates that which has already been approved on the northbound section, with the trees equally spread out within the grass verge. And again, it's just a little bit more of the technical detail of the trees, which again are an exact replication of what's been already approved. Just moving over onto some more of the technical detail, given that it's quite a long, expansive road, a number of cross-sections have been provided just to ensure they satisfactorily integrate into the development. Perhaps more useful are these 3 here. The first one up here is taken at approximately where the northbound crossing on the highway is going to be. You can see that the land is higher on both sides, and you can just see this hatched area here showing the extent of the excavation which will need to take place to provide that southbound lane. And as you move down to where the existing residential properties are, you can see that level increases in height and going down in order to provide that element of it. What you'll get at this higher area here is the future phases of residential development which are going to come forward. Given the high amounts of excavation that's required, there is a condition which is recommended to be placed on the application in relation to the construction environmental management plan to make sure that that excavation takes place in a sensitive way to ensure the amenity of those residential properties is protected during the construction process. Just moving on now, just a little bit more of the technical detail. This plan here shows 2 of the proposed signalised pedestrian crossings. These are the 2 which will be on the High Street element of it. You can see a 2-stage signalised crossing has been provided at the top, and also another one down at the bottom of the High Street, which is located in proximity to the bus stops. But that will also link into a new access point into the community park, just to ensure that the promotion of sustainable modes is encouraged within the new residential development. On William Prance Road and on the school access road, again, the same approach will be taken with the signalised pedestrian crossings. This is considered to provide a safer and improved method of access into the school rather than the existing situation, which has got free crossing at drop curbs. Just dealing now with the principle of the application, as I've said, this scheme forms part of both the wider outline application for the new neighbourhood, but it also provides the starting point for the delivery of the Forder Valley Link Road going in there. The principle of this approach was established in the core strategy and the local transport plans 2 and 3, and the delivery of the wider Forder Valley Link Road and associated infrastructure is a fundamental element of the strategy for the north of the city, and also the connection through to the A38. But it's not just the wider connections which are important. This is obviously an important part of infrastructure which will be serving the new residential communities and also the school. And so officers have been keen to ensure that the technical detail works in that regard to ensure satisfactory forms of access are being secured. In that regard, there are two substantial areas which have come up in the letters of representation. The first of those relates to residents of the existing development phase 5, which you can just see down here, who've raised concern regarding how they'll be able to access their properties when the north and southbound access ceases. What we've asked Persimmon to do, which is shown on this plan, is to just demonstrate the alternative access points which will be available to those properties to ensure that they have got satisfactory access. And what you can see on this plan here is the new access point that I talked about, which will provide access from people travelling down William Prance Road into the new residential development, and they'll be able to access from that point as phase 9 comes on board and these streets become kind of connected circular routes. There'll be another access point being provided in there, going into there. While this is altering the situation, our officers are satisfied it provides a logical approach to the connection of the wider development as it builds out. However, during the construction period, there is obviously a potential impact on those residents, so there's a planning condition recommended on the application which ensures that those two northbound lanes of the High Street remain operational north and southbound to ensure that residents can continue to access their properties during the construction period. Just moving on now, I just thought this is a useful plan for members to see as part of the granting of the reserve matters for the phase 5 development, which is currently occupied. This plan was approved, which is broadly in conformity with that which is submitted on this application. There have been a number of changes. Previously there were proposed to be 3 entrances into the eastern section of the development, but there are only 2 of those proposed now, but officers do understand that works successfully with the strategy that Persimmon are likely to be bringing forward. And also this junction up here was previously going to be a signalised one, but now won't have any signals. It will just be a priority junction. And again, officers and the highways authorities are satisfied that that works in that regard. Just moving on to the next slide, you can just see on here the area of soil store which the developers are seeking to use as part of the development. It is in reasonably close proximity to the school, but officers are satisfied that that can work alongside that without too much impact on the amenity of the school, although there's a condition again recommended on the application for Persimmon to provide the full details of what will be taking place in that area, just to ensure that there won't be any undue impacts on the school. Just finally, dealing with the other area of principal concern which came up in the letters of representation, there's been a lot of concern regarding access to the school, which is located just over in this area here. In relation to securing a safe access during construction has been a critical issue. Obviously, there's going to be substantial works going on, not just the High Street, but when the new junction alignment has come forward. Officers of the Public Protection team and also the Highways authorities have been involved in drafting detailed conditions which Persimmon have agreed, which will secure the submission of detail to make sure access is continually maintained during those works to serve the school in a safe way. And there's a requirement within those conditions that that should be dealt with in consultation with St Matthew's School to make sure they have the opportunity to make sure all their matters are being safely addressed during that construction process. In the fullness of time, once the scheme has been delivered, officers are of an opinion that the revised layout to the road network offers a safe and more secure access into both the school and the residential area. As I say, the detailed consideration is set out in the officer report, but if members do have any questions, I'm happy to answer that, and the officer recommendation is one of conditional approval as set out in the officer report, but with the additional conditions set out in the addendum report, the ability to add those justifications onto those conditions and the additional conditions set out in the addendum report. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali. We have one speaker for this particular item, and that is Mr. Simon Wagemaker. Is that correct? Yeah, fine. Would you like to come forward, Mr. Wagemaker? Thank you. Welcome to the committee. As you're probably aware, you will have 5 minutes to address the committee. and we remind you 1 minute before the end of that time. Okay? So whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Following Mr Wagstaff's presentation, obviously members will be aware that this application's come forward following our close working relationship with the strategic transport teams at Plymouth City Council, obviously in delivering the full length of the FVLR. And this application is following on obviously from the reserve matters approval for phase 5 and is essentially dealing with the technical details of delivering the high street section of that road. Obviously during the course of the application we've obviously been following the consultation responses, and we're very aware that there's a significant amount of concern in the public about both access to residential properties and to the school. And clearly as a developer we want to make sure that not only is safe access maintained for everybody, but also reasonable access in terms of directions of travel. As you saw from the presentation, as the scheme evolves, and clearly it's a long-term project for us, but as the scheme evolves, there will be various routes for people to both access and egress the various residential roads, and those will come along at various stages as we move through the scheme. But obviously the priority will always be to make sure that there are safe accesses available to everybody, particularly in relation to the school. The build programme for this section of the road, subject to approval obviously, is we would build or commence works to construct the eastern half of the high street, and once the sort of main construction of that is delivered, it would then be handed over to the project team delivering the wider section of the road as a haul route. The amendments to the junction on William Prance Road wouldn't be carried out right until the end, the last point when the main construction work is carried out, and that's when we'd carry out the junction realignments and obviously install the traffic facilities. So the north and southbound accesses to the residential properties will be maintained throughout the construction of that phase and through the use of the haul route. And then it will only be once the full route is available and several of the other accesses are available that it would then become the alignment that's shown on that plan on the screen. Obviously, we're fully committed to working with Plymouth City Council and the various officers from the various different teams to delivering not only the Ford Valley Link Road but the wider Seaton neighbourhood. It's clearly a strategic priority for Plymouth and will bring not only social but economic benefits to Plymouth as a sort of growing community. There's a large amount of employment uses that will come as part of the scheme, and the delivery of this section of the road is obviously critical in order to delivering all that. And on that basis, I'd respectfully ask members to approve the application I set out. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay. I'm now going to throw that open to members of the committee, please. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ali, for a very comprehensive report. Following the site visit yesterday and looking at the representations, there are quite a number of representations, some of which are directly linked to this application, others are perhaps historic. Could you just perhaps give a little bit more detail with regards to the assurance of the safety with regards to access to the school, the additional crossing points that you've mentioned, because that is obviously a quite a high consideration where the school, St Matthew's, is growing. There have been perhaps faults in the past with applications with regards to the access and ease of dropping off. So can you just perhaps give us some more reassurance as to how this will perhaps improve those facilities going forward, please?
Certainly, in relation to the role of what this application is able to do to deal with the issues which the school faces. Obviously, the existing setup at the moment is that you've got a roundabout with just drop curb free crossing, so people have to take it into their own hands to find a gap in the traffic. What's now being proposed is fully signalised crossings, which are all included in detail on the plans there, and they are multi-stage crossings. So you've got the two different crossing points there, which allows people a more safer option for crossing the road to access the school. The only route which doesn't have that, which has the drop curbs provided, is on Brest Road, but there is a longer-term strategy that may well become bus only. But as you can see, there are a number of safe access points to cross over into the school, including on its access road. Obviously, the application also provides dedicated pedestrian paths and cycle paths to promote travel there by sustainable means. So officers are of a viewpoint that it does provide a safe form of development that the school can use, and will hopefully improve those facilities for the school and getting children to and from the school. And obviously, you know, we've tried to make sure that it's not just how this application will affect things permanently going forward, but actually, you know, the construction phase has the potential to have quite significant implications. And so officers have been very keen to ensure that the needs of the school and the residents have been taken into account. We did early on in the application have a meeting with the business manager of the school just to explain exactly what was being proposed by Persimmon and to discuss their needs and requirements, and we're keen to continue that working relationship with them. And that's why one of the conditions particularly stipulates that in dealing with those matters it should be in consultation with the school, because we can obviously as officers assume what's best for the school, but it's really important as far as we're concerned to manage that process with the school to make sure they have kind of full engagement with it, and not only that, that they actually have that understanding so that it can be passed on to parents and the school children to make sure they understand how, you know, quite a difficult series of changes are likely to take place.
Okay. You okay with that? All right. Councillor Morris, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my concerns with this were mainly to do with the school as well. And following on from what Nick said there, and what you just said, Ali, when you look at the conditions, the CEMP, Construction Environment Management Plan, and then condition 7 in the papers, and then condition 8, traffic management plan. In condition 8, it does actually say that the traffic management plan shall be agreed in consultation with us and St Matthew's School, and specifically mentioned in condition 8. There's no such specific mention of St Matthew's School on the pre-commencement stuff in the previous condition 7 part 3, and I would suggest that it be specifically put in, if nothing else. I'm sure it would happen, but if nothing else, for the reassurance of the school parents and children and governors and staff, that such a consultation would take place. Because I'm just you know, everything you said was fine, but it's not actually written in that it should be in consultation with the school in condition 7. And the reason I think that that's important is that there's a couple of things in here which leave me slightly worried, which is obviously we've got a succession of different planning applications coming in at different phases, and you know, there's roads and there's houses, there was the school application itself, and some things fall between two stools. So, for instance, the bus for the school, the dedicated bus for the school, was changed from being a pre-commencement condition to being when the school reaches full capacity. But obviously we can't consider that because that's nothing to do with this application. But this application clearly affects the school. And it just worries me that with all of this, that with the lots of different particular planning applications coming in, they are going to have major effect on the school. And I think one of the particular concerns is about not the safe pedestrian route, I think that's been addressed very well, but the drop-off areas for the school. It doesn't seem resolved yet, and yet there doesn't seem to be a way forward to help the school with that, because we can't consider it as part of this application. So I've got another question about the school, but I'm going to be gracious like Nick and let the others dive in. But those were the first two things, which was about whether it could be completely clear that the condition 7 is in consultation with St Matthew's School, and just some words about overall how the school travel plan develops, being impacted by this application, even though it's not a material consideration for us in deciding this application.
Yeah. Can I, just before I will ask you to comment, but I will bring you, then, sorry, Ali, and then Nick. Members do have to bear in mind that we are talking about this application today before us, and not what's proceeded in the past or whatever. So Ali, and then Nick.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, the first thing I'd like to do is reassure members that we are working with the school. I've only recently taken over dealing with the wider Palmerston Heights development. One of my former colleagues, Olivia, has been involved up to this point and was working with the school, and I can assure you that we'll maintain that approach. And Persimmon, as they've said in their presentation, are more than happy to work with the school. So we are working forward in how we can address some of the matters and issues which are felt by the school. But as the Chair rightfully said, in dealing with the individual applications, we need to ensure that they're working in the most suitable way. And insofar as this application impacts on the school by altering the access arrangements to it, as I say, it was one of the key considerations on the application, and that's why we've sought to ensure that you do have that safe level of access. In relation to the wording of Condition 7, were members minded to approve the scheme, and I think officers would be more than happy for that additional wording to be added in there, just that it be in consultation with the school as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, if others are a little bit reticent to ask any. I fully understand that this is a crucial development to unlock the Forder Valley Link Road, which in theory would make accessibility to Plymouth far better. We're experiencing quite a bit of pain at the present time, and no doubt through the traffic management you'll reassure us that this scheme, in conjunction with any others that are in the vicinity, will be coordinated, that we sort of have the best flow possible. What we're doing, though, is we're taking traffic from other parts and making it, in effect, busier in this particular area. And I note some of the concerns are around pollution and possibly lack of trees, the wider directive with regards to diesel cars and petrol cars being sort of phased out in the future. Can you give us any assurance or what calculations are being looked at with regards to the plantation of trees to take some of the pollution away, not just because it's a school area, but you've also got a highly densely populated residential area, and equally you're going to have some commercial areas as well. So that's one question. And the second question, which sort of links in with regards to the buses, what are the perceived advantages of only allowing Brest Road to be bus access only? Would it not give far more flexibility to allow all types of vehicles another way into the variety of commercial, residential, and indeed school as and when it operates, rather than closing that down? So those two questions, if I could, Ali, please.
Certainly, and this is included in the officer report, but I think it's probably just really worthwhile explaining what's going on in relation to the trees and mitigation, because obviously when members normally see a planning application in front of them, there's quite a lot of detail regarding mitigation measures and things like that, tree replanting, the impacts on ecology and biodiversity. This is a full application because there were timing restrictions on the outline and the subsequent reserve matters, which meant that elements of the work weren't consented, in effect, fell out of time. And so Persimmon have been required to put a full application in this instance. But this full application sits within the context of that wider outline application. And there has been a significant quantum of mitigation ensured. On one of the earlier slides, just let me go back to the beginning, a crucial sorry, it's going to be right at the front. A crucial element in considering the acceptability of this wider scheme, be it the road or the residential elements, was actually about ensuring that those environmental impacts were adequately taken into account. The application was supported by a detailed environmental statement, and one of the key mitigation measures which has been delivered is actually the improvement from what was, I think, principally farmland into the Derriford Community Park. And that is a key element to delivery. There was substantial funding secured, as well as the provision of land in that outline application, and our colleagues in the natural infrastructure are busily delivering the works to Poole Farm and that wider area. And so the significant importance of those mitigation are already secured in the outline application, that this one sits within the context of the more specific matters to the road are set out in a requirement in one of the conditions about, sorry, let me get the right one for you. Apologies. think in some condition 16 in relation to biodiversity, that's in effect requiring them to deliver the measures which they necessarily need to do, but that is the very specific measures to do with this application. So the wider measures and mitigations are all being delivered within the community park. There's a new orchard going in there. There's been significant investment, which is in the hands of our natural infrastructure team to deliver. So that's where a lot of those measures have been taken into account. And obviously the landscaping scheme you see with this application principally deals with, in effect, the kind of street furniture you'd normally see. So that's where those kind of two different approaches come in. But it is a fundamental part of the wider outline, and it was one of the only bases on which that application was able to be granted, and it's taken into account in every reserve matters and in this instance full application that comes forward afterwards. In relation to Bress Road, as I said in the presentation, there is a proposal that it's going to be bus only in the future. I don't think any decision has been made in that regard unless either of my colleagues from transportation can advise me. Otherwise I think Scott's just waved his finger, so I think Scott maybe might be able to provide you a little bit more information in that regard.
Scott, did you want to?
Yes, thanks, Chair. In terms of Bress Road, clearly the delivery of the growth strategy for the Derriford area is going to be a combination of providing new highway infrastructure such as the Forda Valley Link Road, but also encouraging a modal shift towards the use of sustainable modes of transport. So the idea of Bress Road being bus only is one, to reduce bus journey times, because once the Forda Valley Link Road is open, we would be hopeful that buses would come in from places like Sherford and Plymstock and actually run up the Forda Valley Link Road. By having that section of Bress Road bus only, it means that the bus gets a head start on the general traffic and gets into the hospital interchange without being delayed, being stuck behind general traffic. The other issue that by making that section bus only is that it means that the general, what I will call the general flow of traffic, which is travelling up the FVLR and then going along Bress Road, that's the main flow of traffic. So if a bus is coming down maybe once every 10 minutes, that's the only time when all of the other arms would get a red signal to allow the bus to come through. So if you were to allow that for general traffic as well, clearly that red would be going on every single stage of the lights, which would mean that you'd end up ultimately getting more delay there. So by making that section of Bress Road bus only, it actually improves the main line flow along the Forda Valley Link Road and then along Bress Road.
Okay. So no firm decision's been made yet, but it's a proposal. The only reason I asked that is there's a stretch off Derriford Road which links Marjon, which is a bus only route, and from what I've seen, having represented that ward, it's not highly used, yet traffic congestion could be alleviated for the benefit of all if it was open to all vehicle access. And sort of the supplementary question with regards to the management. This is a key project, and I understand it's going to unlock huge benefits for the city, not in terms of growth in the north, but sort of getting around and the speed of journeys. But what measures have been put in place with regards to Persimmon, especially with regards to the works programme? Because throughout the city we have seen a number of potential delays on road schemes and or a perception that perhaps they're not being manned or operated with any great urgency to get the completion of the works done. And we're now talking about a key area in the north where we've seen the Derriford transport scheme, we've got the road widening scheme at the moment. This is obviously going to be some more short-term pain for eventual gain, but what measures have you put in place to ensure that, in this case, Persimmon do deliver within a reasonable time scale to stop, congestion and issues for commuters?
I think if I can just come back to you on the latter point, and then if Scott or Steve Flaxon have anything to add about the wider works up at Marjon's. When the outline planning permission was granted, there was a requirement for a delivery strategy and a phasing plan to be on those applications. Earlier this year, they were renegotiated with Persimmon, and a detailed delivery strategy for the provision of the High Street section was agreed. That was done in consultation and in collaboration with the colleagues in strategic transport to make sure that the delivery profile for the High Street element of works work seamlessly to ensure that the delivery of the roadworks to for the Forder Valley work in tandem. So there's a delivery strategy already agreed, and then there's a separate condition dealing with kind of the more specific day-to-day matters there as well. So we are confident that that can work as well. It is vitally important that these roadworks take place in a coordinated manner, and that's why you've got the double-pronged approach from the outline onto this question. I think it's probably also just worthwhile pointing out that obviously a lot of the other roadworks which are going on in this city are taking quite extensive periods of time on the highway network. In relation to the high street element of the works, which is the most substantial, the approach which Persimmon are going to be taking is that the existing road will have hoarding placed along the side of it, and all the works to that road will take place from behind, so they'll be accessing all those works from this area here. So it will take place, so there'll be no disruption beyond that of vehicles and construction people arriving, which is controlled by the Kemp condition. So that ensures that there should be minimal impact on the potential residents as part of that. As Mr. Wagemaker from Persimmon, when he spoke, said it is part of their kind of construction programme that this element of work will take place at the latter end of it, and it will be for a shorter period of time. Persimmon have provided their own delivery programme to us, but that relates to their wider programme of work. But, you know, we are satisfied in this instance that there is a very speedy approach, and that is necessitated in part by the funding we've secured for the Forder Valley Link Road. So we are confident in that regard that there shouldn't be substantive impacts from this, which will affect the highway network in that regard. I don't know, Steve, if you've got anything you wanted to just be able to
Yeah,
say.
before bringing Steve, fine, we'll have that, but I'll just draw members' attention, but we are talking about not the marge on bus lane or anything else. We're talking about the application before us, and try and keep focused on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly then on the marge on Link Road specifically, that scheme was brought in under a public transport-based scheme, and the reason we was able to secure that was working in partnership with Marjons, which actually owned and still own the road, and as part of that agreement we undertook that obviously they didn't want that to become a heavily trafficked route, particularly as it's going to be their land, so that's embedded in the agreement that we weren't able to take that forward. And added to that, the more traffic you allow to use that, the more it starts eroding the benefits of the busway and the basis that we obtained funding to deliver that. In terms of the second point relating to Derriford Transport Scheme, I think particularly with this area of Seaton neighbourhood and Palmerston Heights, it's a very different situation to one that we have at Derriford. I should explain, on the project manager for the Derriford Transport Scheme. And particularly along the A386 section, we have a very evolved legacy network that we're trying to do our best to work within the constraints of that, whilst maintaining the flow of traffic through the area. And one of the biggest issues that we're facing on a daily basis is the sheer volume of utilities which have to be moved, diverted, extended, and works around the actual works itself, whereas this area of Palmerston Heights won't be so constrained by that. There's obviously fresh land, and so those sorts of issues won't complicate the programme in that way. And added to that, you haven't got the same levels of traffic going past this area that you do on the A386. So it's a slightly different situation in that regard.
Okay, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as a local bus user and cyclist, I love the traffic-free marge on Link Road because my bus goes quickly and I can pedal like a demon. That aside, I want to talk about air quality. Again, building on Nick's points about the environmental impact here, and I think this is a material consideration for this application. With the construction of this road, obviously near present and very soon forthcoming housing, and also with the proximity of St Matthew's as well. Air quality is mentioned in some of the objections. It is mentioned in your analysis, Ali. And indeed, it's been of heightened consideration, I think it was within the last fortnight, about the report and increasing air pollution in schools near roads. Now, in my favourite condition, which is number 7, part 3 again, it refers to the detail required for the CEMP, and that it's measures to preserve the amenity of the school, which includes air pollution. And what I would really think would be necessary, given the nature of this road, the residential stuff nearby, and particularly the school nearby, because, okay, the current playing areas are away from the road, but who knows how the school might develop. There's no specific mention in either the conditions or the report about air quality monitoring. And it seems to me that for a brand new scheme, it would seem an ideal situation to have some proper permanent air quality monitoring equipment installed at this location, preferably at the junction, at the developer's expense, because we would start from now. We would have a perfect sort of baseline set of air quality indicators, and therefore we'd be able to keep track over the years of any changes to air quality because of increased traffic or different types of traffic that might use around there. And so although air quality is mentioned, there doesn't seem to be a condition which really nails it down in terms of what we as a council would be able to do to protect the health and well-being of residents and pupils and staff nearby in respect of air pollution.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do my best to answer that, but I'm aware I do have a colleague from Public Protection sat behind me who I may rely on for a little bit more of the technical detail there. What I would say is the council have a range of standard conditions, and dealing with construction environmental management plans is one of those, and dealing with the implications on air quality is a fundamental aspect of dealing with any element of construction work, and that we simply wouldn't be agreeing that condition without those elements of detail there. The reason there are a number of specific measures is because that's where we move into kind of a difference from what we would normally see, and there are those specific matters which are wanting to draw to the applicant's attention that those, in addition to what we would normally expect, which includes air quality, need to also be covered in there. So you can rest assured that we wouldn't be agreeing a construction environmental management plan if it wasn't including those necessary measures for damping down of dust and other control measures during the construction process. In relation to the kind of ongoing impacts once the scheme has been developed, we have considered the implications that the road scheme will have, and we, as advised by the Public Protection, are satisfied that those matters will be satisfactory in relation to the surrounding properties and the school, and as mentioned in the report and is dealt with by one of the informatives on the application, there is a requirement for specific glazing measures on a number of the houses within the area, and some of those haven't taken place on the currently constructed development. So we'll be working with Persimmon to ensure that a number of those measures are being retrofitted to those properties, and that condition will be being met on the future reserve matters phrases for the residential properties. In relation to anything more specific on air quality, Eleanor, I don't know if there's anything you would like to just add in that regard to help the councillor.
Yep, carry on.
Thank you, Ali. Yes, our department in the Public Protection Service, we do monitor air pollution, and actually as part of Section 106 funding, we were successful, and we've now got an air quality monitoring station on Tavistock Road. As you probably all know, the roads and the vehicle numbers are pretty hectic there at the moment because of all the roadworks. What this monitoring station actually shows us is that the average is well below what the government or the guidelines set out. So what this shows to us is that actually, given that this particular stretch of the road at Tavistock Road being a 4-lane, lot of congestion for a lot of proportion of the day, With that being so low, we don't expect this to be low. But as part of the initial outline application back in 2012, an environmental statement was submitted which did consider air quality quite greatly. And it did actually use a year's worth or 5 years worth of our monitoring data, including DEFRA background maps, and Peter Brett Associates, who actually did the environmental statement. They actually did a year's worth of monitoring themselves, and they modelled it on specialist software. And what the outcome of that was that this application as a whole, the Seaton neighbourhood, would have a negligible impact, and it wouldn't increase pollution to any adverse levels. And the residents, any sensitive receptors, wouldn't be exposed to pollution levels that would be potentially harmful to their health. In relation to nitrogen dioxide, which is the main pollutant that we all hear about on the news, that's caused by vehicle emissions. And it does drop off quite significantly. So government do set out, or the DEFRA set out clear guidance as to when and where local authorities should monitor the nitrogen dioxide to assess what the air pollution levels are like at sensitive receptors. So for one example, it should be about 10,000 vehicles per day, then it would expect us to monitor at that road source. And I've just spoken to our transport team, and it's expected that the link road would have about 1,000 vehicles maximum. So it's quite a big significant difference. And from what I can understand from looking at the maps, the school is actually more than 10 metres from the road. So it would suggest again that it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
I was just going to say...
Right, well, look, I want to get bogged down. We want to have a complete, right. You just answer any other salient points, and John, I'll bring you in afterwards, but I think we've had a very comprehensive answer, actually, so go on.
I was just going to add one very small point, which is that actually part of the reason for the Ford Valley Link Road being in place is because it actually improves air quality throughout the rest of the city. It will reduce a number of the air quality issues by providing an alternative traffic route within that. So I just thought it was probably useful for the members' attention.
Sorry, Chair, but it is on this specific point. I have every confidence and every assurance in the modelling that's been done and on all this sort of thing. But in this instance, and I fully take the point about less car traffic, less NO2, but we are talking buses as well, so we're talking PM10s and smaller. And my concern is that in everything that was being said there, we are confident that it will. All our modelling shows that this will happen. I'm still not getting an assurance on a monitoring of it to actually make sure that that is the case. Now, the Tavistock Road air monitoring station is way away from here. Not just in terms of distance, but the topology between here and Tavistock Road means that I don't think it's a relevant consideration. And I'm particularly concerned because it is a school, and any air pollution damage to lungs is obviously far magnified when they are young and hopefully growing lungs. And so I just wanted the proper assurance that all the modelling, how do we know the modelling is going to be correct without doing the monitoring in the future, particularly around the school site? That was my concern.
One more to round up on that, please. Go on. Yeah.
Our department, we do deploy nearly 40 diffusion tubes per month around the city, and if it was requested, I'm sure that we could put a diffusion tube located at the school for a surety in the future. That's something that can be done quite easily. But we don't expect there to be a problem, but to put minds at rest, I'm sure that we could arrange something along those lines.
Okay, all right. Are there any further questions on this application? Okay, all right. The recommendation on your agenda is to grant permission subject to the conditions outlaid to you on the agenda and also on the addendum. Is that Carly?
The amendment to condition 7.
Yeah. Can you just relay what that will be specifically?
The addition suggested to condition 7 was to add in consultation with the school.
Delegated, was that the one?
No, that was in relation to conditions 4, 9, 10 and 11. While they have the detailed conditions requirements and a reason why the conditions are placed on, they don't have a justification, which is a national requirement on pre-commencement conditions. So it's just us as officers adding an additional element of word in there just to justify why they're on there. It wouldn't alter the subject matter, but we're just asking for delegation to the Assistant Director that can be added on under his discretion.
And the one, we got the one with the school covered, yeah.
Yes, we're
Okay.
more than happy to deal with that in that
Is
way.
everybody clear and clarified on where we are? So the recommendation is to grant, subject to those conditions. I would ask you to vote now. Yeah. Right. That's that the application is granted by a large majority. Thank you very much. That brings us on to item 7, which is your planning applications decisions issued, which you've all been circulated a copy of that. Does anybody wish to bring any of those to my attention or your attention? No? Brings us on to item, or number 7, agreed? Right. Item 8, appeal decisions. You have a schedule of the decisions made. Is that noted? Sorry, can't. Yep. Sorry, Carly?
Sorry, I just wanted to draw members' attention to the first one, the Chapel Street decision, as this was an application that came to Planning Committee. It was refused in line with the officer recommendation, and unfortunately the appeal was allowed, and it was on parking grounds. So just to draw members' attention, because it was a committee decision.
I think we went on a site visit there now, didn't we? Yeah, I remember that, yeah. Okay, so, right, yeah. Okay. Councillor Stevens' ward, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, indeed it was. Okay, right. Sorry, Sam. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, sorry. Much as I like having Carly here, it's unfortunate that Peter wasn't here, because I was dealing with him on a specific point which the appeal, the second appeal, actually touches on, and I'm slightly worried now in that we had a discussion about a particular service lane where on one side it's already been developed. On the other side, somebody was putting an application in for an annex to go in there, and in the discussion it was, we'll be able to refuse it because of the fact that the ancillary use, we can't control it, and that was fine. But I just see that there's now an appeal decision has gone against that, and I'm slightly worried that I'm going to see in this particular, it's not a road, it's a service lane, that I'm going to get a load of annexes being put in there, which will subsequently become separate accommodations, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, Councillor Davey, I will ask Carly to comment on that, but I think you raised valid points, but I think we're dealing with the issues, the decisions which are being relayed to you that have been taken just right, yeah. But yeah, Carly, would you just make a comment?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, we do have to bear in mind appeal decisions when we make future recommendations, and there have been a couple referring to annex accommodation, which we have lost appeals on. However, you know, everyone's judged on their merits, and it might be that there's different circumstances, so we'll need to look at the detail of that, but we can of course discuss that with you outside of the committee and have a look at that. Okay, Councillor Davey, that's fine. I'm sure if you wanted to, I'm sure if you wanted to contact Peter, he maybe expand on that if you've been dealing with him in previous Nova. Okay, right. So, Councillor Pengelly.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that I was very pleased that the inspector refused that huge big sign that was going to go up on, or it did go up on Elberton Road, then they took it down, then they appealed against our decision, and the inspector agreed with us. I just wanted to say I was very pleased about that.
Oh, we're pleased, you're pleased, Councillor Pengelly. Right. Okay, is that the appeal decisions dealt with? Because we have got one further item, which is item 9, exempt business, which there is none. Okay, and with that, I declare the meeting closed.